Hey fellow bass gear nuts, this is Sean Fairchild for Bass Gear Magazine, and today we're looking at the Ashen Amps APG700.4. Let's get into it. Alright, if you're not already familiar with the Ashen Amps name, you could be forgiven, as they are a relative newcomer designed in the US, produced in the Ukraine. However, they do offer many different SKUs of bass gear, amplifier, and speaker cabinet products, as well as a full line of guitar products. Now this amp here is the APG700.4. It's the Ashen power generator, 700 watts into 4 ohms. It is available in 2 different configurations. One is with a custom wooden cabinet, as this one is adorned, and one without. Okay, let's start with what the APG700.4 is and does really well. Main thing that it does really well is volume. This amp is loud. I mean, the master volume right now is set, for the video just vertically, but in practical usage, I never got this thing past 9 or 10 o'clock on the dial. It is a loud amp, and that is partially perhaps due to the fact that Ashen is using a proprietary power module that's not a Bang & Olufsen ICE power module as many Class D amps use, or at least that's what I am led to believe through working with the company over email about their specifications. It's also a very thick bass and mid-range heavy amplifier. That's really where the APG 700.4 shines. If you play anything from classic rock to jazz, country, where you might want a really traditional big deep bass tone, without any overdrive, so big, clean, loud volume, this amp might satisfy you. As you can see here, we only have 5 controls to worry about: presence, blend, treble, bass, and level. So there's no input pad, there's no separate preamp volume, master volume, there are no switches. It's a relatively straightforward amplifier. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get as many technical specs as I like to see from companies. Ashen is a little bit more guarded with their information, so I wasn't able to specifically determine the frequency points at which these controls work. So this is all according to my ears and what I feel like I've noticed. The presence control sounds to my ears to be centered a little bit higher than the actual treble control. Again, I don't know exactly where that is, but I'm going to take a wild guess at somewhere around 4.5 or 5 kilohertz, perhaps. Moving on, we have the blend control. Now, this is a really unique thing about this amplifier, and I think it's going to be a polarizing aspect. Blend control, what is it blending? I asked Ashen. The blend control is actually a mid-scoop control. So when it's all the way counterclockwise, if it's set all the way like that, ostensibly you have the full amount of mid content that the amp is producing, or that it's seeing from the input. As you rotate it clockwise, that way, it's cutting out mid-frequency content. Kind of an interesting way of going about things. And they label it blend because they feel like you are blending in the mid-range with your tone. It basically gives you a mid-contour as the essence of your tone sculpting options. Next, we have the treble control, and I feel like treble is centered relatively low on this amp, maybe even as low as 2.5 or 3 kilohertz. Again, no tech specs to go from Ashen, these are just my observations. Followed by the bass control, and with this one I wasn't really able to determine what frequency that it works at, but it is very effective at adding weight and girth and basically, how you would use a bass control. And then finally level, which is the overall master output volume. We have a single line output right here, XLR, on the front panel, which is kind of cool, kind of a little bit less common, a little bit more unusual, and totally welcome. I think that's a cool feature to have. There's a single Neutrik twist lock speak-on connector in the back, and just a single power switch in the back. So very simple front panel, very simple rear panel. This is an amp built for simplicity and ease of use. The APG700.4 is a very lightweight amp. This one with the wooden enclosure is 9 pounds. Without the wooden enclosure, it is 7 pounds, I believe. So very small, lightweight, easy to pick up and take with you wherever you want to go. Without the enclosure, probably able to be slipped into the pocket of a gig bag, which is pretty convenient. Ashen provides a 3-year limited warranty to the original purchaser, and the current purchase price of this amp with the wooden cabinet is $1,299 US, currently discounted to $1,100. So there's a $200 discount running at the time of publishing here that applies to the version of this amp with the wooden cabinetry. All right, so we've talked about the features and the specifications of the amp to the best of my ability with the information that's available, but let's talk about what this amp is not. The APG 700.4 is perhaps not the ideal amp if you want a really full range amp that's capable of very hi-fi sounds. It was difficult for me to get a, in my mind, what is a suitably modern tone with enough air and extension on the top end to be able to kind of hear string noise where I wanted it, to cut out a specific part of the lower treble or upper mid-range and have extension beyond that for slapping and more modern techniques like that. Now, as mentioned before, I had a little bit of difficulty with the blend control being the sole way that you manipulate mid-range on the amplifier. Takes some getting used to. It's a little counterintuitive to me. I didn't have as much control over frequency centers and shifting of that mid-range as I would normally like. Additionally, the treble control is centered low enough, seemingly to my ears, low enough to not effectively give me what I would think of as actual treble, but more just like sort of extended high mid-range. So the presence control is the one that I found myself using more for an upper extension and try to bring some of the life and air out of the strings. And obviously, with the design ethos of this amp being a more simplified amp that's just ready to go, plug and play, it's not designed to give you every possible option that you might want in terms of signal routing. There's no effects loop. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've actually used an amp's effects loop. But there's not a lot of different input and output options on the amplifier or options to switch or shift EQ centers or voicings. What you see is what you get, and there's a nice simplicity in that, I have to admit. Now this next part I'm going to go over more in depth in our written review along with close-up photos, so again, make sure to see bassgearmag.com for all of this information. There will be more about it there, but since our amp did come adorned in the beautiful wooden enclosure, the cabinetry we found to be substandard, certainly less than instrument quality. There are dovetail joints that are not flush, there's deep gouging and scratches, there's irregularity in angles when you're sighting along the side. You can see edges that are not true and straight. And oddly enough, the company seems to actually provide caveat against this, saying that, hey, we produce unique handmade items and they're priced accordingly. This feels a little bit like buyer beware language to me, and honestly I feel like I would expect more from a $400 option of cabinetry being added around an amp. I would expect a little bit higher quality and attention to detail. I would love to see some of the cabinetry side of things examined more closely by the company to produce a product that is on par with the electronics that they produce. My feeling is that the overall quality and craftsmanship of the woodwork does not necessarily warrant the additional cost. My personal recommendation then would be to go with the APG 700.4 without the cabinet enclosure around it and save yourself some money that you might be able to use elsewhere more effectively. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. It's been great to do this with you. You know I love these little meetings of ours. It's been awesome getting to know the Ashen Amps APG700.4. It's a very straightforward little amp that I think is going to make a relatively wide subsection of players pretty happy. So worth checking out, especially if you haven't played through one yet. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like. Likes don't cost you anything. Just make sure to like the video. And hey, if you like it, subscribe. And if you're gonna subscribe, you might as well hit the notification icon, right? That little bell. Ring that bell, and that means every time we publish something new, you're gonna be the first to see it. All right, you guys, I'm Sean Fairchild for Bass Gear Magazine, and I'll see you next time.